Rabbi say, all of us, I think, know the meaning of the term a real person. We're all biologically real people, but morally and spiritually, there are real people. And then there are people. People are all wonderful, but real people are real. And I suppose one of the truths about real people is that they're one of a kind. By definition, there's no copy machine of real people. There's no carbon paper and many duplicates of the same. Real people, emes mentioned, genuine human beings who have taken for themselves a course and they walk down it without looking to the right or looking to the left. They're individuals. They're very, very much personalities, individuals, distinct, special, unique. And of course, their forms take on very, very interesting idiosyncrasies. Real people are, because they're real and interesting and not following anybody else, they often have interesting aspects to their definition that I suppose some people wouldn't go to such a space. When you talk about servants of God, servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is really the highest level of real person, or a real chassid would say, the only level of real person, because service of God is about sacrifice, it's about dedication, it's about the greatest reward that I could possibly have by me being connected to something other than myself. This phenomenon of real people being individual is even more acute, it's even stronger, it's even more distinct and special and so forth. And this is true in every walk of life, it's true in every area of Chassidus, it's true in every area of Yiddishkeit. However a Yid is connected to Hashem, whatever particular path he has, whatever teachers he follows, if he's a serious Oved Elokim, if he's a serious servant of Hashem, there's something about him that makes him distinct, special. And amongst Chabad Chassidim, that's also true. Real Chabad Chassidim were very, very much individuals. They were all serious servants of Hashem. They all loved one another. They had great respect for one another. But they weren't looking over their shoulder. They were very much individuals. There's a long, long letter from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe where he describes two of the giants of Chassidus Chabad. Rabbi Isaac Homler, who was a chassid of the first three Lubavitcher Rebbes, and the Hillel of Paritch, who was the chassid of the second and third of the Lubavitcher Rebbes. And what he says about them was that they were so similar, but their anchors were very different. Rabbi Isaac was first a mind and then a heart. Rabbi Hillel was first a heart and then a mind. And the previous Rebbe develops this idea in great detail, at great length. I don't want to go into that. I just want to bring out the point that emes is distinct, real. Emes is very, very special, very, very unique. And I'm sure this is true in other walks of life, but certainly in Chassidus Chabad, there were certain Chassidim who were in their emes, in their honesty, in their integrity, in their individuality, behaved, I guess, in ways that you would seem to you as odd. For example, I suppose the best example of this would be the great and famous chassid of Shmuel Munkes. Shmuel Munkes was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he was a tzaddik. He was a ish mura mayam. He was a holy man. We know stories of his life that he wasn't just a devout chassid. He was literally connected to God in a very distinct and a very, very special way. And he had a style. He had a way of serving Hashem, which was all about letzonis, acting like a jester and giving the impression of being a practical joker. And everything he did had, kavonas hamukis, had very deep intentions and thoughts. The story which the previous Rebbe writes about in his writings is that Shmuel Munkes was once walking to the Alter Rebbe's chotzer, to the Alter Rebbe's home, with a group of Chassidim, and suddenly he dashed ahead of them. He ran before them, and of course the Chassidim knew that if Shmuel Munkes is running ahead of them, he's up to something. He's going to make some kind of a practical joke. Anyway, they came around the corner to the street where the Alter Rebbe's home was, and Rabbi Shmuel Munkes had predictably suspended himself. He had hung himself above the arch of the door, the entrance into the courtyard leading into the Alter Rebbe's chutzner. And they see him hanging up there. I don't know how he suspended himself. And the Chassidim, of course, went under the arch. It was all very funny. Everybody laughed. And he said, Shmuel, what are you doing? So Shmuel said that when you go to a tailor, how do you know you went to a tailor? There's a suit in the window. You go to a shoemaker. How do you know you're at a shoemaker's shop? And the answer is there's a shoe in the window. When you come to a Rebbe, you have to see a chassid in the window. Now, of course, it's a cute story. It's a Shmuel Munkes story. Ha ha. But Shmuel Munkes was saying something very profound, which has two parts. Number one, if you have a Rebbe and you're a chassid, you must look like one. And you must look like one in such a way that another chassid or another yid who's drawn to the Chassidus or who's curious about the Chassidus should look at you and say, if this is a chassid of this Rebbe, I too want to be a chassid of this Rebbe. And of course, the second thing Shmuel Munkes was saying is, look at me, I'm a chassid, I'm a model. And I can assure you there wasn't the slightest trace of gaiva in Shmuel Munkes' communication. This was simply who he was. Shmuel Munkes was a Ruchniyazdika Jew, was involved only in Avodas Hashem. And I'll tell you another story, Shmuel Munkes, which is a bit uncomfortable, but it reveals who he was. Shmuel Munkes was a widower. He lost his wife at a very, very young age. And he had one daughter whom he raised alone. I don't know how much raising he did, but he had one daughter. And he was extraordinarily poor. He was so impoverished, you have no idea. But he was Shmuel Munkes. He was a very special chassid. When it was time to marry off his daughter, there was a proposal made for a shidduch in a particular town, where there was a mechutin, a family that was, relatively speaking, comfortable. They were by no means as poor as Shmuel. And for this girl, there would be, her father was a holy man. There's an old expression, the tata's in Himmel and the mama's in the red. Where am I supposed to be? You can't translate that into English. The father's in heaven and the mother's in the ground. What are you supposed to do? And she was probably raised, her mother had passed away, her father was a and for her, this marriage would have been very useful. So the story goes that they came to town, and he says to his daughter, go to this address. This is where you're supposed to meet your prospective chassan, and I'm going to go daven. So Shmuel Munkes went to find himself the quietest and most deserted shul in all of the shtetl that nobody should even know he's here. And he davened the way that Shmuel Munkes davened. Davening took him hours, and he went into another world and so forth. In the meantime, this girl in rags knocks on the door, literally in rags, knocks on the door of the home of this prospective mechutin, the man who was destined to be her father-in-law and the man who was destined to be her husband. And they open the door and they see a girl dressed in rags, so they figured that she's a panhandler, she's a Schneur. They give her an adava. They give her a coin, she takes the coin, but she stands there, she doesn't leave. They say, what's the problem? It's not enough money. They give her another coin. She says, no, my father told me to come here. He said, why did you tell your father to come here? He says, well, I'm supposed to meet a chassan. It took him a while to realize this was Shmuel Munkes' daughter. And he says to her, and where is your father? Oh, my father went to daven. He took one look at this girl, and the first thing he did was he gave her a change of clothes. She should look like a mensch. And then he went to look for the Shmuel Munkes. And he found them in Ekshtat. It took him a long time till he finally found that shul where nobody was, where Shmuel Munkes was sitting in a corner in another world. And I believe that the Shmuel Munkes saw his daughter, didn't recognize her. And the mechutin walks up to Shmuel Munkes, and he very impatiently waits him to finish davening. And he starts to shout at him, "Azay handelt mit der Yiddische Tochter." He was not upset at the Shmuel for how he treated him. He said, this is how you treat your daughter? You send her in rags to my house by herself to knock on the door. Sagt der Shmuel, as ich weiß, as du bist as balas spilas, his reaction was, if I knew you were so combustible, so emotionally reactive, I would never consider making a shidduch with you. Shmuel Munkes didn't even hear his complaints and his protestations and his issues. He said, would you relax? Just calm down. Everything's fine. Gives you an idea. He was a personality. He was a very big chassid. Be'emes, a big chassid. It's a personality. Another example of a big chassid was the chassid Rabbi Lepler. We've talked about him on a number of occasions. He lived a very, very long time. He was a chassid of 4 Lubavitcher Rebbes, the Alter Rebbe, the Middle Rebbe, Rabbi Ber, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, Rebbe Menachem Mendel, and he was even a chassid of the Rebbe Marash of Shmuel, the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe. Kusha Lepler was in his 80s, and the Rebbe Marash was in his early 30s. And I've told you some stories about Kusha Lepler. What's interesting about him was he was a very big chassid. No one means a big chassid. A big chassid means that you could not make a joke around him. You couldn't be cynical. You couldn't be sarcastic around him. And here's a story, that there was once a group of Hasidim sitting in a room, and someone made a joke. Big deal. Someone made a joke. Everybody laughed. Kusha Lepler did not get the joke. He just didn't understand it. And then after a few seconds, he realized that somebody had said a litzana. Someone said a joke. And of course, you know what the Chazal say about litzanim, leitzim. So he says, litzanis, of course, litzanis, a joke. And he stands up. The Alter Rebbe's Chassidim, whenever they would quote their Rebbe, would stand. Ich habe allein gehört von Rebben, als der was sagt, litzanis sollen ihm Schädim nehmen. I myself heard from the Rebbe, meaning the Alter Rebbe, that somebody says a joke will be possessed by demons. And that young man who had made that joke innocently lost his mind. He became mentally ill, crazy, and he remained that way for the rest of his life. I mean, it gives you an idea. You know, this was a chassid, and I suppose that Rebbe would have more constraint, but you had to be careful around Kusha Lepler. He said the wrong thing, and he would get the wrong impression, and he would have to be makbid, and you were finished, you were toast. He was a very, very big chassid. And there was a great chassid who was a disciple of his, who was sort of a makabel from his, who's famous in the Chabad culture, called Shmuel Ber of Badisav, Shmuel Ber Badisav, the Rashdam. He was chassid to the Tzedek, the Rebbe Marash. He was also by the Rebbe Rasha, by the previous Rebbe's father, the third, fourth, and fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe's. And Shmuel Ber related that in his relationship with Kusha Lepler, it was a very, very uncomfortable relationship, because you couldn't mess around with him. You couldn't make any jokes. You had to be very serious, because you never knew where he was coming from, and you could never know his reaction. I mean, imagine a person says you should be possessed by demons, and a person becomes literally possessed by demons. Not for 15 minutes, for the duration of his life. So you have to be careful. Kusha Lepler had this walking stick, this cane. He'd walk over to this Shmuel Ber and hit him on the shoulder. Vosim is shver. What's bothering me? What's bothering me? In other words, he wouldn't tell him, what's bothering me? So Shmuel Ber developed a whole technique where he would start out with a very, very broad spectrum, and then try to narrow it down, try to figure out what part of Kusha Lepler was disturbing it. Was his davening? Was it his learning? Was it this mind? Until he would sort of find a way of leading it, because he had Lepler to his question. Why he played this game, I don't know, but that's the fact. Kusha Lepler remained, he was an incredibly great chassid, one of the greatest maskilim, the greatest intellectuals in Chabad philosophy that ever lived, and he remained till the day he died a retail shopkeeper. He had a little store, and he sold stuff on an avenue, and he walked around in dungarees. Kusha Lepler didn't wear a big streimel and a long kapate. He walked around, I could imagine him in overalls or in denim, with a red rope around his waist, with an axe in his belt if he needed it, selling whatever he sold. He was externally the same ordinary, small-town man he had been when he started out his Hasidic journey, and at the beginning of his Hasidic journey, he was in fact a very, very ordinary man. In other words, you met a man with a mind of platinum, with a mind that was so edel, so fine, of the finest material. And on the outside, he was, I wouldn't call him a brute, but he certainly was not a man whose exterior reflected in a consistent way the sensitive, the spiritual, the refined dimensions of himself. Rambam speaks about a chocham being nikir and achilose and shtiyose and teyule and shinase and malbushe. I don't want Kusha Lepler to say any critical words of me, but he didn't conform to that. He was himself. And he was very, very special, very, very unique, and very, very honored by Hasidim, because, as I've explained to you the story on previous occasions, over the course of his life, he worked very, very hard to become the chassid that he was. I tell this to you because I want to talk to you about several other Hasidim who also were real people and as such, they were very distinct in their mannerism, in their life form and behavior. And I suppose if you were not initiated into the world of Chabad Hasidus, you wouldn't necessarily see their lives and their behavior as honorable. But you have to, so to speak, get into the world of these people to understand the integrity, to understand the emes of their lives. These were real Hasidim. And the most important word in the life of any Chassid is avodah. They were laborers. They were servants of God to the point of Mesiras Nefesh. And this dedication to that purpose and that service was so total and so whole that it didn't matter at all how another person perceived it, what another person thought of it, as long as it was emes, you see? And I'll explain to you what kind of chassid I want to discuss, because it's a prelude to the Maamar we're going to learn. Some people are fine. They're fine. They're edel. They're refined, sensitive, fine people. Fine people are fine in everything. They're fine in their mannerisms. They're fine in their dress. They're fine in their language. They're fine in their eating habits. They're fine in their interpersonal relationships. And some people are what's called in the Chassidus Sher Nagach. They're not fine. They're much more rough on the edges and much more abrasive in their mannerisms and their style. And they're simpler people. They're not so sophisticated in their external muhus, as we would say it in the Hasidic lexicon. And nonetheless, they were very, very great Hasidim. And one of the things that distinguished different personalities of Hasidim is how they viewed themselves. Hasidim, real Hasidim, who worked on themselves, some of them had extraordinary Yetzer. They were incredible Balei Taiva. They were people who, had they not been Hasidim, would have been the greatest lusters and pleasure seekers in the world. But because of Yiddishkeit and because of Hasidus, they suppressed all of that and they overcame all of that and they became truly refined. They were really refined. They weren't acting, they were truly refined people. But the nature of their relationship with the Yetzer Hara remained constant. And when you met them, the first impression that you got in meeting them, at least in some cases, was, this is an animal. An animal that's being tamed, an animal that's being contained, an animal that's being directed, an animal that's being conquered and harnessed and streamlined and focused, which is an incredible thing to do. And all of that animal is being invested in Avodas Hashem. And to these people, that reality, I have an animal that I need to contend with. Like you see the signs on the sidewalk, curb your dog. Violators will be will be fined $500. These were people who lived their entire lives from that perspective. Curb your dog. Deal with your behemoth. And they didn't sugarcoat it. They didn't whitewash it. They didn't pretend that it was something more sophisticated and subtle. You met a person who was in perpetual war with the Yetzer Hara, and you knew it and he knew it. And you know what? Honesty is not such a terrible thing. As an aside, we live in a very, very difficult age. I don't have to tell you. And the reason the age is so difficult is because the communication and the technology have brought the Yetzer Hara into our home in a literally unstoppable way. Every person has to be in control of himself. And everyone's looking for solutions. There's meetings, there's mass meetings. And one of the things that must be stated in dealing with this new age is that we have to stop lying. We have to stop pretending we're big Hasidim when we're not big Hasidim. We have to admit, I have tests, I am drawn to these inappropriate things, inappropriate places, inappropriate sites. And if I had the opportunity, I would fall in. And the admission alone, and as they say in the 12-step program, I am helpless against my addiction. The recognition, I cannot fight this animal myself, is the first real step in being able to solve it and conquer it. And if we would stop making believe we're tzaddikim, because this is how it's supposed to look, and instead say, Ani chamor. You'll hear why I'm laughing. I am a behema. I am not refined, and I need to admit to myself that I have these weaknesses and this crude side. And the admission and the saying it up front, of course, to oneself, is the first step in empowering oneself to gain the support, to get the help from outside of self if necessary, to gain a mastery over these kinds of tests. And Chassidim who are real never thought twice about it. There's a Gemara Masechet Kiddushin that relates the story about the Rabbi Amram, one of the great Ameroyim, who was in a home where there were women. It's the end of Masechet Kiddushin, talks about the laws of Yichud. And he was downstairs and they were in an attic. And there was a very, very heavy ladder. A ladder that was so heavy that it took 3 or 4 men to carry. And the ladder was taken away from the attic so that he shouldn't have an issue with Yichud. And in the middle of the night, this Rabbi Amram, the Gemara tells the story, was tempted, and he personally carried the ladder, and he put it up against the entrance to the Aliyah, and he started climbing the ladder. And when he realized what was going on, he started to scream, "Fire! Fire!" So they came running from all around, and of course there was no fire. And they said to himself, "Rebbe, you had to embarrass yourself like this?" And Rabbi Amram said, "I'd much rather embarrass myself here in front of you than embarrass myself in front of my Maker." Now, you tell that story, so your first reaction is going to be, of course, how could a tzaddik have such thoughts? That's not the point. And I don't know the answer to that. But who amongst us has that much integrity? So I'll be embarrassed. You're not allowed to sin. And the admission that we have a behemoth to contend with is so important today. So important. Say it straight to myself and to begin to deal with the tests of the modern era from that perspective. And in this light, I want to tell you about 2 Chassidim, one of whom I saw, one of whom passed away more than half a century ago, who conformed to this model. The first was a Chassid by the name of Rabbi Zalman Moshe Yitzchaki. I recently told you a story of him. So Moshe Yitzchaki was a very big Chassid. In fact, when he passed away, the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, our Rebbe, wrote to his family, Zatzal, Chanin Tzadik Levrach. He was a shoichet by profession. And in his younger years, he was a big lamdan, and then he started learning Chassidus, and he became an unbelievable oived. His life was defined by avodah, by davening, by learning, by working on himself. And he was a very edel man. People who knew him said he was an edel man. A very, very edel man. But on occasion, especially when he said l'chaim, a very I guess the right word would be a very angry side would appear. You would see raw passion, raw hate, literally, raw hate for his Yetzer Hara. And it came out almost in a vulgar way, in an angry way. And people who knew him when he davened and when he learned couldn't believe how this is the same man. He would say l'chaim, and you would see literally how much he hated his Yetzer Hara, and there was nothing sophisticated about it. It was anger and it was hate toward his own Yetzer Hara. That's how he lived his life. That's how I'm sorry for using this expression, that's how he curbed his dog. And he was who he was because he never ever said, you know what, maybe it's time to start liking myself. He never achieved that. He remained in that state of hatred. As a parenthesis, I want you to know that there is a story of a great chassid of the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad movement, who was asked what brought him to Chassidus. What made him become a Lubavitcher chassid, a chassid of the Alter Rebbe? By the way, the Alter Rebbe was not a Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was never a Rebbe in Lubavitch. He was in Lozhna and in Liadi. And he says he was put him in a shul. And he saw a chassid, another chassid of the Alter Rebbe by the name of Zalman Zezmer. And when they said Haman, and when you clapped Haman, people were banging Haman, I saw that he really hated Amalek. He hated Amalek, and I wanted to hate Amalek like he hates Amalek, and this is what drew me to Chassidus. I met a man who hated Ra. He hated evil, and I didn't hate evil, and I wanted to hate evil also. And Zalman Moshe was such a chassid, and there's many, many stories about him. In fact, he came to Tel Aviv in the 30s, and there was a small kibbutz, a community of Lubavitcher Chassidim, Chabad Chassidim, as they were called. And in that generation, there were Chassidim, and there was a very special category of Chassidim that were called Tmimim. Tmimim learned in Lubavitch. They had the personal tutelage of the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, and his son and successor, the Rebbe Rayatz, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Tmimim were Tmimim, as the word denotes. They were whole in their Avodas Hashem. They were real people. And Zalman Moshe was a Tomim. And he came to Tel Aviv, the community of Chabad Chassidim. And Chabad Chassidim are serious people. They do learning, they do davening, they do meditating. But he felt that there was a lot of pretending. There was a lot of self-love. People were very, very proud and very satisfied with their own level as a chassid, and he couldn't suffer that for a minute. And he let everybody know in his own outspoken way what he thought of the community. And they wrote letters to the previous Rebbe that this chassid came from Russia and he's out of his mind. And the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote him a letter. I sent you one of my Tmimim, one of my closest people. And I thought you would value him and appreciate his push, his midas emes, his integrity, his emes. It was all directed at himself. He was angry at himself, not at anybody else. And look at you, you're complaining that his external demeanor is deficient. I thought you would value a tomim. So here's a story. I heard this story some 20 years when I got married. Betel Gerevich Shalom was a friend of my grandfather's, told me this maise, that he was a makabel from Reb Zalman Moshe. And he told me the following story, that in 1932 there was a famine. The famine was really all over the world. But it was unbelievably acute in Russia. Russia, the Ukraine, which had been the breadbasket of the world, because of the incredibly innovative ideas of the great and illustrious leader Joseph Stalin, people were dying from hunger in wheat fields, you understand, in the most fertile land on earth. And of course, when there's a hunger, people literally are looking for a piece of bread. So the first thing people do in times of famine is they go away from the villages to the big cities, because in the villages there's absolutely nothing to eat. In the city there's an opportunity to find food. A Yid showed up in a big city. I'm sorry, I don't remember which city it was. And he shows up in shul. The man was starving. Comes into the shul, a Yid steht in davened. Someone is davening, it's 2 PM. There's Al Moshe davened for many, many hours. And he waited for him to finish. And when he finished, they exchanged Shalom Aleichems. And he says to Reb Zalman Moshe, I'm starving. I'm starving. So Zalman Moshe said to him, you know, I have ration cards from the government. I'm entitled to a certain amount of bread. I don't know if you understand the culture. When you go to Russia, patev, bread has to be patev. Pas Yisrael is a different issue, but patev, bread. And he was also entitled to milk, but there was milk from a cow. Chalav Yisrael, milk from a cow. And I'm not an expert on milk, but apparently when you milk a cow, the milk separates. The top portion of the milk becomes very rich and creamy, and the bottom part of the milk is more lean. So he says to this total stranger, he says, I'll make a deal with you. Ich will sich mit dir teilen halb auf halb. This is the middle of a famine. I will divide my rations with you 50-50. And the rations, if you ate a full ration, it wouldn't satisfy you. We'll cut the bread in half. Then we'll take the milk, and we'll divide it in half. This is what he says to this Jew. Für sich will ich nehmen die ganze Smetana. All the creamy, the rich milk is for me. And you will get the lean milk, the skimmed milk, the milk without fat. And then he says to this stranger, and afterwards you have to say to me, this Zalman Moshe sagt ihm, Chazer, für was nimmst du für sich die ganze Smetana und mir gibst du die Magere? Then you have to tell me, Chazer, swine, how can we take all the fat, the rich milk for yourself, and you give me the lean milk? So this Jew, who's dying from hunger, thinks to himself, to call a Jew a Chazer, to get half his ration, sounds like a plan. So he agrees. So he takes out his bread, they cut it in half, 50-50, and they take the milk, and they divide it, and Zalman Moshe takes fazich for himself, the ganze smetana, the whole rich part of the milk, and he says to this other Jew, you get the mugade, you get the lean milk. He says, okay, he takes the milk and the bread, he wants to go eat. He says, wait. Now you have to say to L'Shem Yichud, now you have to say something to me. Sagt Chazer. He says, yeah, I forgot. Chazer. Why'd you take for yourself the cream, the fat, and me, you give the lean? So Zalman Moshe says, bis gerecht, you're right. And he changed with him. And this he did day after day for weeks. What kind of game is that? You want to give a person your food, give him your food. You want to give a person your fat food, give him your fat food. For him it was important that somebody should remind him of his behemoth and the truth of his animal. Because this is how he was a warrior. He was a warrior and his enemy was himself. And he was a tzaddik. I mean, understand what that means. This is one personality. And the second personality was a chassid by the name of Rabbi Reuven Dunin, who lived in our generation. He was a chassid of our Rebbe, and he passed away probably a decade ago, and I think it's around this time of year that he passed away, 2002, if I'm not wrong. And there's a book, a biography of his called HaTraktorist Shel HaRebbe, the Rebbe's Tractorist. It's beautiful. There's many stories to be told of him, and the essence, the core of this biography is really an autobiography because he himself recorded much about his life. Reuven Dunin was a real Baal Tshuva. That means to say he had been from a frum home, from a very, very edela, fine home. His father was a Talmud of Rabbi 11, the tzaddik of Yerushalayim, a tzaddik in our times. Very fine people, and they lived in Haifa, I believe. And he, during the years of the establishment of the state of Israel, went away from Yiddishkeit completely. And then he did tshuva. And he did tshuva completely. And he was notorious, he was famous for speaking in a language that was not for everybody. He spoke about his Yetzer Hara, the way he felt. The Yetzer Hara has to be talked about with all the vitriol and all the hate and all the honesty that the Yetzer Hara needs to be defined as, because this is how he lived his life. He also was a big chassid. And in the Lubavitcher world, he's famous for his unbelievable love. He loved the Rebbe. He just loved him. He loved him so much. And when he would talk about the Rebbe, you saw a sweet, spiritual, almost holy person. When he talked about the Yetzer Hara, was a totally different human being. So I read his autobiography, his book. It's not an autobiography, it's a biography. And there's so much to tell. But one of the stories that I get especially a kick out of it, and I've been telling this story lately to a lot of people, he was coming home from a Fabrengen. And he had a few lechaims, maybe more than a few times a few. And he's sitting in the car, and naturally somebody else is chauffeuring him home. And he's bothered, he's upset. What's his issue? He sat with people. The people, he didn't sit with yeshiva bachrim, he sat with people who were not frum, and many of them were blue-collar, they were not refined people. Not, by the way, that people who aren't frum, who are white-collar, are somehow more refined. Unfortunately, that is simply not the case anymore. It may once have been true, but it's no longer true. The same behemoths. And he spoke to them a language that was unequivocal. When he fabrained with people and talked about the Yetzer Hara, everybody knew exactly what the score was. There was no wiggling out of it. You know, you had to confront the fact that we are animals and we got to deal with it. So he's coming home from the Fabrengen and he's lamenting, he's complaining to his chauffeur, to his driver, Lama loma minli shani chamor. He was fabringing with them. He was talking to them about the Yetzer Hara. And of course, he doesn't want to insult people, so he talked about himself. And he described himself as a chamor. Chamor means a donkey. And chamor also means chumrius, crude, unrefined, brutish. And when he sat with this group of shomer hatzeniks, these not frum boys and girls, and he talked to them about becoming human beings and not, being two-legged animals. One of the people in the room said to him, Harav, ata lo chamor, anachnu chamorim. You're not a chamor, you're a rabbi. You're a scholar. You're a fine man. And he had a whole discussion. He says, no, I'm just like you. I have the same Yetzer Hara as you and the same struggles and the same issues. And they refuse to believe him. And he's going home from the bang and it's disturbed. How come they don't believe that I too have a big, bad Yetzer Hara who bothers me and he tries to tempt me not into doing little fine sins, like getting gaiva from the 2 blat gemara or 10 blat gemara, but sins like an animal sins. And he was bothered by the fact that they didn't believe him, that he too has that kind of Yetzer Hara. So his chauffeur tells him, don't feel bad. I believe you. He wanted to make him feel better. I'm not trying to be sarcastic, I'm not trying to be funny, I'm not trying to be entertaining. I'm trying to communicate a style of chassid. And there were many different types of chassidim, many different styles. What makes a chassid real, and not everybody who calls himself a chassid is a real chassid. I suppose we should say, we all try our best, but real people are few and far between. And they're very individual. And he certainly was an individual, and his whole life was lived from that premise. I'm an animal, I gotta deal with it. And that admission, that honesty made him successful in dealing with the animal. And in the Chabad history, and I'm sure this is true in other Hasidic groups, you could think of Kotzk as an example of honesty to the point that's uncomfortable and so forth. That's what it was. It didn't matter whether it looked nice or it didn't look nice. It just had to be the right thing. And if it meant screaming fire and being embarrassed by the neighborhood, so be it. The most important thing was that you had to defeat the Yetzer Hara. Now, I think even you will admit that I got a little carried away. We're 35 minutes into the class. You have no idea what Maamar we're learning. Let me tell you why I gave you this lengthy introduction. I gave you this lengthy introduction because the vast majority of this Maamar, probably 2/3 or almost 3/4 of the Maamar we have before us, makes this very point. Now, the Alter Rebbe doesn't talk like I talk. And maybe I myself shouldn't talk this way. The Alter Rebbe speaks like the Alter Rebbe talks. Even if he has to describe the Yetzer Hara and all of his animalism, and all of its brutishness, and all of its crudeness, he says it in the language of the Torah, in the finest of words. What this Maamar says, that if you want to be a servant of God, you got to get into the trenches. You can't say, I want to be holy. You can't say, I want to be lofty and exalted and involved in higher things. Why? Because it'll be a lie. The Yetzer Hara, the animal that we all possess, that is to such a degree our prison warden, he's our master, he controls us, has to be dealt with. And if you want to deal with Yetzer Hara, you have to speak the Yetzer Hara's language. And the language of the Yetzer Hara is not, please sit down and be a good boy, I'll bring you a cherry. You understand? The language of the Yetzer Hara is the language of the Yetzer Hara. And the Alter Rebbe here in this Maamar talks about this. He talks about this Maamar using karbonis as a model, sacrifice, where the key word is the word eish, fire, and the emphasis in the word eish is passion, heat, intensity, demonstrative, external passion and heat, not deep, inner, quiescent passion and heat that you hear about big tzaddikim. The kind of anger, passion. Yetzer Hara is my enemy, I'm going to fight him. And then later on in the Maamar, there's a lengthy discussion about avodas tefillah, about davening. Remember that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. And because we have no Beis HaMikdash, we're not able to bring karbonas. And instead of karbonas, we daven. And the Alter Rebbe develops very beautifully, very nicely, how davening is also the same fire, the same passion. And he talks about Succed de Zimra a little bit. He talks mostly about Birchas Kriya Shema, specifically the first bracha of the Shema, and about angels. And he says, what is it about angels that puts them into our siddur? And the answer is, and angels are passionate. They're aroused, animated, excited beings. And that's important for us, because our animal souls' passions come from the angel passions. Although in the case of the angels, that passion is directed towards God, and in the case of the Yetzer Hara, the passions are directed towards something different. And he talks about, be emotional, get excited, be angry, so that when you daven, the Yetzer Hara is davening, or at least the Yetzer Hara is being attacked. So there should be integrity, not just in the davening, but in one's life. Sure, there are higher levels when you get to the Shema. You become quieter, more thoughtful and intellectual. When you get to the Shemona Esrei, even more so. But you don't begin the davening with Shema and Shemona Esrei. You begin the davening with Moida Ani and Hareini Makabel and Hoidel Hashem and Baruch She'amar and Pesach Es Yadecha and Kadosh 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 and Baruch Hu Hashem Im Koimei. You go through all of these stages of davening that have one basic idea. Let us speak the language of the animal, because it would be a terrible thing to be dishonest in our relationship with God. Who are we bluffing? When you're dishonest in your relationship with a human being, there's a purpose. You want to trick them. When you're dishonest in your relationship with God, who are you kidding? Yourself. The Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Reb Shmuel, used to say, as a nar meint, as a nar de Welt, the fool thinks he's fooling the world. Naren narter mer nicht wie sich allein, he's fooling only himself. Nu, is then a kunst nar na nar? Is it then a trick to fool a fool? And this is something, it's uncomfortable, I think. As uncomfortable as it is, it's so important. We want to grow as Jews. And of course, growing as Jews means not having fantasies, wishes, hopes, fleeting dreams that are disposed of so we continue living our lives. We want to grow in Avodas Hashem. The beginning of that growth is admitting, pardon my candor, ani chamor. I have a Yetzer Hara, and he's my master. And he's not Edel. He's not Edel. He's not. And engaging the Yetzer Hara on the Yetzer Hara's terms, which means employing fire, passion, anger in my Avodas Hashem, is dealing with Yetzer Hara in an honest way, and it allows me to harness him, to control him, so that I can serve Hashem with Hanemis and with Hashem's help grow. And this Maamar, to a very, very great extent, addresses this point. At the very end of the Maamar, of course, the Rebbe makes the point of saying we always need God's help. So the last part of the Maamar talks about the help that we get from above. But the predominant point and message of this Maamar is the Yetzer Hara is a fire. I'm going to fight him, fire with fire. The Yetzer Hara is an animal. I know how to speak the language of an animal. I've got an animal of my own, and I'm going to use my animal to conquer, to gore, and to defeat the Yetzer Hara by tapping into the supernal animal, the animal which is the angels on high, which is the source of my animal soul down here. I suppose 41 minutes and 49 seconds qualifies as a long enough introduction to an hour-long class on Likutei Torah. Let's learn something. Okay, line 1. That when one goes out to war against his enemy, when the son, God Almighty, is going to give him into your hands and help you succeed. And the Torah continues as Vishavisa, Shiv Yivagim, and you will capture a captive. And then, of course, you have the halachas of Eshes Yifasteh. This is the beginning of Parshas Ki Seitzei, our Parsha. And what it's saying is that when we go into Israel, Jews engage in wars. Some of these wars are wars for survival. Some of these wars are wars of conquest. Some of these wars are Melchemes Mitzvah. Others of these wars are called Melchemes Rashus, wars Jews choose to engage in. And when you fight with an enemy, Hashem is going to help you succeed. And if you capture a captive, there's a way to behave towards that captive within the framework of halacha, like it says in the beginning of our parsha. So the Alter Rebbe doesn't address the halacha of war and Yefastayet at all. He goes straight to the mysticism, to the Pnimius. Hine, Isa tells us, Shas Tleisa, Shas Krava, the time of prayer is a time of war. When a person davens, they're engaged in a war. Why? Because you are confronting the Yetzer Hara. You're not avoiding him. You're not placating him. You're confronting him. And what is the weapon of choice? Animalism. The weapon of choice is the eish, the fire, the passion, which is the language of the Yetzer Hara that you engage. That's how you engage. We find that the Torah says, Yaakov Avinu makes reference to the war that he fought against the Gentiles in conquering Shechem, or holding on to Shechem, using cherev and keshes, which means literally a sword. And keshes means a bow, but v'targam unkelos, the Targum translates. What does it mean? Becharbi bakashti, my sword and my bow, b'tzleisi b'usi, my prayer and my pleading, which is not a literal translation. There is an Aramaic word for sword, there is an Aramaic word for a bow, but the Targum says that Yaakov Avinu's weapon of choice in defeating the enemy was prayer. So of course, from the perspective of Yaakov Avinu, it reveals his holiness, that instead of picking up a bow and an arrow or a sword, he says a tefillah and it defeats his enemies. But the message for us is that prayer is a war. The question is, what does it mean that prayer is a war? And I want you to know that there's Maamorim in Ranat and in Tafshin Dalad and so forth that say that prayer is called Cherev Shel Shalom, a sword of peace. Real war is eating food. Prayer is called Cherev Shel Shalom, but nevertheless it's a war. What is the connection between davening and war? Why must we pray every day? Why not only on occasion? And the Rebbe answers the two questions by going into the idea of karbanos. Razal says in the Gemara Tfilas Keneged Midim Tikna that we pray today because in ancient times people brought sacrifice karbanos. So in order to answer the questions that we've raised, in as much as prayer is concerned, let us first turn our attention to karbanos, to sacrifice, and then we'll come back to prayer. And the idea of karbanos is, we'll get back to davening soon. As the Pasuk says, my God Almighty says, my sacrifice for my bread, for my fire. In other words, as though Hashem is eating and we're feeding Him. Shoyim Akriv, and carbon that the physical animals were sacrificed bisman beis hamikdash. In the time that the temple, the Beis Hamikdash stood, La'olah is a completely consumed sacrifice, Agabi HaMizbeach, on the altar. Mimin habehema, or from the various different types of animals. And this was physically performed. They would physically shecht and sacrifice an animal. And I want you to know that the Rambam says very clearly, when Mashiach comes, we will again bring sacrifices. I don't know what Peter is going to do about it, but Peter will probably peter out when Mashiach comes. Today, and what was the idea of sacrificing an animal? And of course, it wasn't the flesh of the physical meat, an animal that was sacrificed. It was miyat chalbi v'dami. You were sacrificing your own animal, like it says in Chazal and it says in Sfarim, that when you bring a carbon, you would visualize how everything being done to the animal, including the consumption of its fat and flesh, would have been done in you. And the idea is that a fire should descend from heaven and consume the sacrifice. Ki chayes, nefesh habahamis, the passion, the vitality, the life of the animal soul, he yeseda, this is her root, this is her element of that's most significant, mi yeseda eish, from the element of fire. And explains what he means. We know that there's four kingdoms, there's four levels of existence. A human being, who's called medaber, a communicator. Lahavla, an animal, it's called a chai, a living being. That he can move around and he can so forth. And then you have a plant, and then of course you have a mineral, an inanimate being. And it says in Kabbalah, fire, wind, water, earth correspond to man, animal, plant, and mineral. But which is which? So obviously earth is like a mineral. Water would be like a plant. But when it comes to fire and air, which is the animal, which is the person? So in many Maamarim they say that fire is the person, and the wind, the air is the animal. But in some places they bring from the Kisferis or the other way around, and this Maamar is no exception. The animal is fire, the human being is wind. Fire. Says the Rebbe, Bechinas Eish, the dimension of fire, who Bechinas Nefesh HaChai, this is the soul of the animal. Or Bechinas Ruach, the idea of spirit, who Bechinas Medaber, this is the level of the communicator. That means the human being, as we find in the Torah, Vayahi ha'adam le'nefesh chaya, human being, is called Nefesh Chaya, living being. And Targum Onkelos, the Targum Onkelos interprets this to mean Leruach, to a spirit, Memalala, that can talk. So a human being is called Ruach, which is in this context called higher than Eish. And the Nefesh HaBahamas, the Yetzer Hara, is called fire. And you sacrifice a physical animal not only for the fire, but for the passions that the animal himself possesses. And then fire would descend from heaven. What you wished for was that the passions of the animal, the fire of the animal, as represented by this sacrifice, should be included in the passions that come from on high. And the Rebbe continues and he says, I want you to know that the fire that came from heaven, is also called an animal. Now, I didn't know there were animals in heaven, but there are. Malachim, angels, are called Chayes HaKedesh, holy animals. But on high, that animal expresses itself in an uncontrollable and unconstrained passion for Hashem. And as it's nishtalshel, as it evolves from the animal passions of the malachim, of the angels, in their desire and their love and fear of God, to the physical animals, there's a disconnect. There is a turning of the back. There is a klipa layer, which doesn't allow the source to be known to the creature down here. So it's the same animal, same passions, but they're involved in nonsense instead of being involved in serving the Yebshter. Visharshan, on the root of the physical passions of the physical animals, is b'merkav ha'alyin, is in the supernal chariot, the face of the lion, the face of the ox, and so forth. V'zehu, which is why it says in Medrash and also in Zayar, Aryeh de ochal korbanin v'chol. There was a revutza kari, there was the likeness of a lion on the mizbeach that consumed the korbanos. Now, simply speaking, it was just a miracle that God Almighty performed. Mystically speaking, it's saying as an animal is being eaten by an animal. And the point, in other words, is that when we daven, if we don't get passionate about our davening, we're not davening, we're studying siddur, and we're being dishonest. It's the passions that makes the davening real, because that's the language of the animal soul. And he says, "Umishachara beis hamikdash," and once the beis hamikdash was destroyed, tiknu anshe knesses hagadei latfila, the rabbis, the members of the great assembly, enacted prayer. Sheyakriv kol echad, nafsha bahamis, each one of us should sacrifice our animal souls, laha'aleisa, to make it ascend, to raise it up, ulakasha, and to attach it, bisharsha, in its root, shehigam kemetadeish, which is the angels on high, which is also from the element of fire, umakeir chutzpah, the source from which the neshama, the animal soul, was carved out, yun, v'yaseidasa b'hararei kedesh, and it's being rooted in the holy mountains, which is Merkav Alyen, the supernal chariot, which for the Kabbalists keeping score at home is an Elam Abriya, the face of the lion, the face of the ox, and so forth. So davening takes place of a korban. So if korban is about animal and about passion, davening is about animal and passion. As we'll see later on. I will see you Mitzvah Hashem next class. I want to conclude. We read 11 whole lines. Mitzvah Hashem next week will do less talking and more reading. I feel like it was worthwhile. I hope I didn't disappoint you with my long stories. But I want to finish with this point. There is a series of Maamar Chassidus that are called Zocher. Zocher is Maamarim connected to Amalek and Purim. And there are many Maamarim from the various Lubavitcher Rabbeim, Chabad Rabbeim, on the Pasuk Zocher Asher Locha Amalek, and in various different types. One of the most famous Maamarim Zocher is from Tafresh Samachei from 1905 by the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Reb Shalom Deber. His son and successor, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, repeated and expounded on this same Maamar Zocher in Shnas Tafresh Pei Zayin, the year of his arrest, in 1927. These two Maamarim are very, very famous. And the Maamar is about Amalek. Amalek. And in this particular discourse, the discussion about Amalek revolves around the idea of Asher Korcha. Asher Korcha means he cools you off. Asher Korcha is an interesting word with many denotations, many intents that really do come together. But one of them is Korcha Lashon Kerach. He cools you off. It says, I think, in Sefer HaYashar, one of the ancient medrashim, that a man sees a boiling bath. And he knows if he'll jump into the bath, he'll get burnt. But he also knows that if he jumps into the bath, he'll cool it, and after him, others will be able to jump into the bath. So Amalek sees the incredible respect that the Gentile world had to the nation of God, to the holy people of Israel, and he couldn't take it. He just couldn't stand it. So he says, okay, I'm going to jump into the fire, get really, really burnt, but I'll take away some of the aura, I'll take away some of the mystique, I'll take away some of the sense of awe that the world has towards the Jews, and after me somebody will attack them later, which is why Amalek is considered so evil. So he jumps into the hot water and he gets burnt, but he cools the water at the same time. And Amalek is famous for this idea of Shekarcha. Whatever you're doing, Amalek says, just relax, cool it. Don't be so passionate. Don't be so excited. Don't be so aroused. And the Maamarim, the previous Rebbe's Maamar, and his father, the Rebbe Rashab's Maamar, give you models, examples of Amalek, different types of Amalek. A person that's davening with too much slava, too much passion, his neighbor says, shh, And one of the Amaleks that described in the Maamar is the intellectual Amalek, the sophisticated Amalek, the enlightened Amalek, that comes along and says to you, what are you so excited about? Why are you crying and shouting when you daven? You're a smart guy. Relax, be cool. We are enlightened. We are modern. We don't get so emotional. He says the Maamar, that's Amalek. It's Amalek because you need that fire. You need that passion. That's the language of the Yetzer Hara. And if we are to engage and defeat the Yetzer Hara, that's the only method. And when someone comes along to you and says, don't be so excited, calm down, in many cases, that individual may represent Amalek himself. And this is what this Maamar has begun to teach us. And Emetz Hashem will teach us next week with the help of God quite elaborately. We're going to do a lot of reading Emetz Hashem, with Hashem's help, of course, next week, about the need to have a time in our lives, and the time for this is prayer, to be emotionally excited, almost angry about our Yetzer Hara. That's how we deal with the Yetzer Hara. That's how our honesty allows us to control him, to contain him, to conquer him, and to transform him. And we'll continue Mitzvah Hashem next week.